Good morning, Sofia.
Good morning, Sarah.
Thank you so much for joining us today for this episode of Thrive with Us. I'm very excited to be picking your brain about a very important, very relevant topic. We're going to be discussing self-esteem in children and teenagers, what it is, what it looks like, and how it gets affected, and how we can help the people close to us have a better, healthier self-esteem.
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. I agree that self-esteem is a big issue that we see a lot in therapy, we see a lot around us, and it is important that we identify what self-esteem really is, other terms that are being used interchangeably, how it affects us, factors, coping strategies, anything that can potentially be relevant and helpful for the parents and teachers and other people out there that deal with young people.
Yes, I think this episode is going to be full of lots of actionable advice for all of the relevant stakeholders in the lives of young people.
It has to be.
Before we get into that, I just want to take an opportunity to introduce you. So I am here today with Sofia Stigka with a master's degree from Leiden University in the Netherlands. You've been with us at Thrive since September 2021. You work with children and adolescents, but mostly I would say your caseload is
Teens.
the teenage years.
True.
So probably seeing self-esteem as a thread through many of the issues that people are coming to therapy for.
Yeah.
So welcome again. And as we said, we'll start by defining and helping people understand what self-esteem is.
Yeah, so I would say that self-esteem is the internal narrative that we have about ourselves, is how we value ourselves and believing in ourselves, knowing that we can deal with life's challenges and act in a way that communicate that yes, there will be challenges and we are strong enough, we are resilient enough to go right through them. Of course, it doesn't mean that adversities, we won't encounter adversities, but bouncing back from adversities is what self-esteem, self-confidence, self-value is, how we can define self-value with that. Good.
Yeah. So self-esteem is linked to self-confidence, self-worth.
They tend to be used interchangeably, and they are all related with how we perceive ourselves and the internal narrative that we have about our resilience towards life adversities.
Okay. So self-esteem as a concept is something neutral. However, people can have high self-esteem, people can have low self-esteem, and people can be somewhere in between. So if we are to think about children or adolescents that you've seen in therapy or out in the real world, what would you say are some real-time, real-world indicators of a healthy self-esteem?
So self-esteem starts building from a very young age, and studies have shown us that both genetic factors and environmental factors do play a role in building self-esteem and how self-esteem is expressed and its variability. There are ways to identify high self kids and adolescents that believe in themselves a lot more than others. A confident child is a child that will take risks, is a child that will that feels secure enough to make mistakes and knows that a mistake is okay, I cannot avoid it, I will bounce back soon enough, and mistakes are welcomed. On the other hand, a child with low self-esteem is a child that will deal inevitably with lots of negative emotions, strong negative emotions, is highly critical of themselves, highly judgmental, will avoid taking on opportunities, so mistakes don't count as learning experiences for this child. And it is important to note that the home environment plays a very, very important role in helping the child build their self-esteem. Again, later on, other factors play a role, but for example, the genetic ancestry for sure plays a role. We know, we have research that shows that the genetics that we carry affect our self-esteem. The home environment, the way our caregivers respond to our needs, and then the social environment, social dynamics affect how we believe in ourselves, right? Let's not forget that we are highly relational creatures, and the way we identify ourselves is highly related to the way others see us. Yeah. In terms of the home environment, and I think that this is one of the most important aspects of self-esteem, it is important to note that we have parenting styles that we need to take into consideration. And we can think of parenting styles as a spectrum. On the one side, you have the permissive parenting style where the parent doesn't intervene at all, the parent doesn't affect their child's decisions. That's not very good stuff, indeed. A family system shouldn't be too democratic. There must be a hierarchy, and the hierarchy is there not for the child to be suppressed, not for the child to be exploited, but it is there to protect the child, to guide them, to redirect them towards safer and wiser decisions. In the same way that you wouldn't allow your 2-year-old play with fire, go near the fireplace, you are there to guide your child towards safer decisions. On the other side of the spectrum, you have the authoritarian parenting style, and this leaves little room for independence. No much room for decision making. The decisions are being made by the parent for the child, and this is how the child creates this internal script that I have no voice in the world. So later on, the child won't have the experience, since this is it is a matter of experience, right? It is a learned behavior that you are trained, that you are being taught to defend themselves in the outer world, because he wasn't given the experience, he wasn't given the appropriate exposure in the home environment. Mm-hmm. Right in the middle, you have the authoritative parenting, and this is what we are aiming for. A parent that is there to set boundaries, but within those boundaries, there is freedom for and allowance for mistakes, right?
Yes.
So yes, the child has the freedom to take decisions, even if those decisions are wrong. The parent is there to validate those wrong decisions and to let the child know that, it's okay. We're not perfect. We're not supposed to always take the right decisions in our lives, but we can go through them and bounce back. Mm-hmm. An authoritative parent is there to express some no's and some don'ts. And that's okay. Inevitably, the child will have to experience at some point no's and don'ts.
Yes.
Right? And it's better that these initial no's and don'ts come from the parents, so the child gets immune towards these no's. So they become a lot more resilient and they can navigate adversity later in their life. Now, something similar applies to the school environment. If a teacher is highly critical of your abilities, they don't allow much space for exposure. Mistakes are not a learning opportunity anymore. So the student, the child in its role as a student, remains silent. They won't expose themselves. Let's not forget the social aspect as well. Like we see these days very, very complicated social dynamics, peer dynamics, especially now with the social media platforms where we have all these keyboard warriors that they will express negativity towards their classmates, towards their peers, from the safety of their house, from the safety of this of a screen. Many factors to take into consideration when we think of what influences self-esteem, and it's not a linear process for sure. As I said, genetic factors, what you see and what you get from the actual experience from your house, and later on from the school and from your peer relations, they all form opportunities, establish opportunities to either express your self-esteem or to self-sabotage.
Thank you. That was really helpful in explaining what high versus lower self-esteem looks like, as well as explaining the different socializing agents that we have and the different factors and people in our lives that can influence and impact on the development of our self-esteem. As you were sharing, I think one of the things that really came up for me is this concept of grit and this concept of growth versus fixed mindset. So what I would imagine is that people with a higher self-esteem probably have a bit more of a growth mindset, in that they believe that their skills are not inborn and that through exposure and risk, calculated risks, they can learn and they can develop and they can grow. That my intelligence, for example, is not fixed at birth. It's something that I can improve upon, something that probably will require me to make a number of mistakes, but mistakes are opportunities for growth and for development.
And this is exactly how the concept of growth mindset was developed through what intelligence means, and how it's not fixed, how we are not born with a particular set of skills, but rather our experiences and our willingness to develop our skills plays a significant role. Now, one of the important questions that need to be answered is how the home environment can be supportive in a way that develops a growth mindset. And I think that this is a good opportunity for a parent to do some introspection and ask themselves if they do model positive
Yes.
self-talk, because what we experience and what we see tends to be much more powerful than what we are being taught. So if a parent says, oh, but you need to be strong, oh, but you need to bounce back, oh, but you need to go out there and expose yourself, but doesn't do something similar, or keeps complaining in the family dinner about the adversities that he had throughout his daily life to abide by, it's a mixed message.
Yes, it
And
is.
a mixed message is a very confusing message. So parents need to reflect on whether they communicate in action what they want to see from their kids.
They do. And I think that the other piece of that is it's okay for parents to also be a little vulnerable in front of children. I know that as parents, we are a source of safety and security. And so we want to present as competent, we want to present as strong, in the words of Dr. Becky, as like sturdy leaders. But we are also human. And that means that we're also scared of things. And I think that within limits, reasons, parameters, it's okay to share that with our children that, you know what? Doing this thing that I did today was really scary for me. I've always struggled with that. And I took that step and I didn't enjoy it at the beginning, but I survived and it's okay. And probably
Exactly.
next time it will be a little bit easier. That doesn't show us in the light of weakness. It allows us to connect, I think, with our children and model that it's okay to have those feelings and that you can still come out the other side.
And this is exactly how self-compassion looks like in action. Yes, we are human beings, we are vulnerable, we are not as strong as our kids may think that we are. And eventually, with time, even developmentally, our kids will realize that. So it's better that we communicate that in action from a young age, and that we are a team together, and we are here to figure out things together. Now, modeling of positive self-talk doesn't really have to come only from parents, and parents can employ other sources as well, even if that means that they employ books or cartoon characters or any other form of a positive model that will show how others figure out their problems. I think that especially with younger kids, but with older ones as well, humor and keeping it funny and casual is very, very important. So instead of keeping a highly didactic style, introduce some humor, even when you talk about the most important, significant topics and matters. With the younger ones, with the little ones, you can employ resources, equipment. You can be like very dramatic, very theatrical about it. Even once you try to challenge their negative thoughts, you can employ even a magnifier.
Okay.
You can wear your hat, you can wear a trench coat, you can pretend to be, I don't know, like Inspector Gadget or
Yes.
Sherlock Holmes or any type of detective that will mean something to them, and search for evidence. Oh, no one likes me. Really? No one likes you? Show me the evidence. Let's look for the evidence. Yes. So, borrowing from CBT terms, looking for evidence in an age-appropriate way, in a way that is developmentally meaningful.
Yes.
Will help them change the narrative.
Well, you mentioned a little while ago that we can use characters and we can use books, and you just referenced Inspector Gadget and Sherlock Holmes, which are great examples of that. Are there any books that you've been recommending lately to parents, or even TV shows that are helpful for modeling some of these skills or emotional awareness? I know that a lot of parents really like Daniel Tiger on Netflix for some of that
Yes.
emotional awareness and regulation. Do you have any other favorites?
I would suggest animations that are low stimulation, videos that focus on the social dynamics rather than other topics. I would say that Masha and the Bear is
Okay.
a good one. I would say that Puffin Rock is a very nice one. You look how the protagonists navigate difficulties. No, I can't think of anything else. Of course, these are for younger ones, for our little ones.
Okay.
No.
So we have Masha and the Bear and Puffin Rock for the younger
Yeah,
ones. And
yeah.
then as parents kind of select something, just being mindful that emphasizing the social dynamic is more important. And why would you say that that's the case?
Because eventually, developmentally, the parents are not such a strong role model for the child. And the child believes more in the peer interactions, in what her friends are doing, rather than what their parents suggest as a good idea for them, right?
And I would imagine you see this in the clinic as well, since you work with adolescents. What happens often, which is quite normal, is that around the teenage years, there's also just like a rejection of what your parents believe. The peers really take on that importance as the socializing agents. And so people want to be like their peers. And a lot of the
Yeah.
things that parents say, even if they make sense, even if it's pretty
Yes.
consistent messages from childhood,
Yeah.
at this phase, they're wanting to de-individuate and find themselves, build their own self-concept. And so anything that comes from mom and dad is automatically wrong or bad.
Peer rejection is a major trauma for a teenager. And yes, we do tend to see in the clinic referrals that are misinterpreted as, challenges with the peer dynamics, challenges at school, emotional challenges, but deep down, these are expressions of lower self esteem that, with the help of the parents, we try to bring to the surface and work with that. So yes, it's actually very true that many of the referrals that we get in the clinic are the result of low self-esteem, and parents and the individual, him herself, tends to underestimate the importance of their self-confidence. But when you do exercises to help them understand that, how would you have navigated this situation if, and then we identify a stronger set of skills with higher self-esteem. How would you have resolved this XYZ issue? So yes, it is very common that the backbone of the challenge is the lower self-esteem.
Yeah, what you're saying makes a lot of sense because we said that the peers become much more important and essential in the lives of a teenager. And so if somebody is experiencing peer rejection, that's going to cut them to their core, essentially, because these are the people that they're wanting to be accepted by. And if someone has already a low self-esteem, there's going to be this question or concern around not being good enough. And when they're rejected by peers, it's really pressing on that button. And I would imagine it's then going to impact a lot of things. Maybe they're going to face greater difficulties socially. Maybe they're going to either suffer academically or throw themselves into the academics, maybe on the other hand, just to kind of overcompensate or avoid the feelings of rejection that they have.
The thing is that a youngster with lower self-esteem tends to be voiceless because he hasn't experienced having a voice in the world. And this takes us back, and let's link it to the parenting styles and how both permissive parenting style and the authoritarian, especially the authoritarian parenting style, doesn't allow enough space for the child to express their opinions, to fight for their rights. So creating a warm home environment where you allow the child to have a voice creates this internal script that, hey, my voice is important and my presence is important in the world, and I will fight for it. Now, a good idea to instill that in a playful way is to go through old photos with your parents, family photos, helping them understand that their presence in your life is important, and reminding them funny moments that you had together, or frustrating moments that you had together, and oh my, how did I survive I don't know, like breaking my favorite cutlery and when you were 5 years old, right? Helping them understand that their presence in your life had a significant impact is a very good way to remind them that, hey, my presence in life is valuable.
Yes.
A great tip as well that tends to work wonders from my experience is to praise them, not in front of them, but to praise them while they are in earshot, in front of others.
Yes.
Right? Because it's not a praise anymore. It takes a more objective view, and the more objective, the more valuable for the child. So the child won't say, oh, you are saying that because you are my dad, because you are my mom. So they recognize that their parents objectively will give positive feedback about them to others.
So it must be true.
So chances are that yes, it is true.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing from you, and I think it's a really important point, is that our inner voice, in large part, is developed from our caregivers, our parents. So if there is this inner voice, if we're constantly hearing that we are capable, right, and we are in an environment that is safe and secure, and we can trust our parents, and they put some boundaries for us, even if we don't like it, we know that it contributes to that sense of safety. So the inner voice, or the inner critic, is internalized in large part from our early childhood experiences.
Correct. And to be honest, on some level, it is a shame to see that parents seek support when things have started to fester, and when low self-esteem is very well established. And I would like to take this opportunity to say that the earlier the better, and there's nothing wrong with seeking support or with not having all the answers. Just because we become parents doesn't mean that all of a sudden we are magicians and we have all the answers figured out. Even us, we are in this field, and sometimes we are completely clueless about how to navigate a difficult situation with our child. So yes, the earlier the better, so a parent has the proper resources and the proper equipment to navigate potential future challenges that will inevitably come. You cannot do anything about it, but how you respond to it
makes a difference.
Of course, this is where where the difference, where the change will show.
Yeah. One of the things that you were sharing before about the objective praise, so giving praise to someone else, reminded me about something I've read about recently and that I've even been trying to employ a little bit at home. So let me know what your thoughts are about this. So there's the direct praise to the child. There is the praise to others while the child is within earshot, and that's a bit more objective as you described. And then there is having the child be proud of themselves. And so what that sounds like, for example, I've been trying to say to my daughter more, you must be so proud of yourself. That was amazing. How do you feel? So the objective there is to have that source of self-esteem come from inside rather than I feel good when someone tells me that I'm good, but I recognize that that was good. And I can tell myself that that was good. And I realize saying you must be so proud of yourself is kind of a bit forcing and
Imposed.
or imposing the feeling. So probably there's some room for refinement there. But the idea is essentially letting them experience that and learn how to validate their own achievements and accomplishments, as well as the other two forms of praise that you noted.
And of course, the same goes for their mistakes, right?
Yes. So
validating a mistake is equally important than as much as celebrating the success. And in the same way that success doesn't really define us. It is there, yes, we will acknowledge it, we will celebrate it, and this is a very important piece of the puzzle. In the same way, failures and mistakes don't define us either.
So let's talk about failure a little bit more. It's something that has come up a couple of times in our conversation today. Number one, failure is inevitable.
Yeah.
Number two, failure has a very bad reputation, I think. People see it as something terrible and something to be avoided. And if we are going to accept both of those things as true, that it's inevitable, but it should be avoided, then we're going to find ourselves in a very precarious situation. The reality is, as you were sharing before, is that failure is an opportunity to learn. And so we can wallow in that failure and beat ourselves up for not making the right decision or for not having done things as well or as efficiently as we could have. Or we can introspect, identify where things have been better, and hopefully incorporate that knowledge moving forward, and not to see that failure as an extension or reflection of ourselves, as flawed, not good enough people, but rather as part of our humanity.
Failure is a great learning opportunity, and we can learn so much more from failing rather than from succeeding. That's true. But the first step while dealing with failure, especially from the parent's side, is to validate the difficult emotion. Right.
Okay.
And this is a coping strategy. Actually, it's one accepting that yes, you will encounter failures in your life, and that's okay. And yes, it must be very difficult to deal with failure. If we don't immediately jump into saving the child from the difficult emotion of dealing with the adversity. The adversity is there, and we need to make sense of it, and we need to validate that it creates negative emotions, but positive negative emotions, because it is important to distinguish between positive and negative, unhealthy and healthy negative emotions. In the same way that there are unhealthy positive emotions, for example, excitement is not very good. There are healthy negative emotions as well. Being sad is fine. You actually respond to a difficult situation. Of course, you cannot expect your child not to be sad, to be happy all the time. Being angry, being frustrated is fine, but finding ways to deal with this frustration in a self-helpful, in a healthy way, this is the key. So it is important that you create a plan with your child and you put on the table or all available resources on how you can make a plan to resolve all issues as they arise.
I love the idea that you were just sharing about emotions and understanding them and not just jumping to the conclusion that this emotion is automatically a bad thing, because the reality is that all emotions serve a purpose for us, right? They have a function. And for instance, you were saying sadness. There is no happiness without sadness, right? We have to have,
sense.
you wouldn't understand it. But so if I'm to understand you correctly, if a child experiences failure, which they will many, 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 many times, part of validating it is attuning to them emotionally.
Exactly. Sitting on the problem and acknowledging that, yes, there is a problem. Okay, what we can do about it. So yes, a problem-solving mindset, but before we reach to the solution of the problem, acknowledge that there is a problem.
That this sucks. And I can totally see why you're feeling sad. I can see why you're feeling worried. I can see why you're mad. I would be mad if I were in that situation too.
And this is another great opportunity for some parental reflection and introspection. Are we being honest with our kids about the adversities that we deal with on a daily basis? Do we sit on the dinner table trying to pretending that we live a super exciting, happy life with no failures, with no mistakes? Or do we express and communicate the process of accepting the mistake and the failure? And it doesn't even have to be, it can just be a frustrating moment, losing your doctor's appointment because of how heavy traffic the road Sheikh Zayed had, right?
Or going to the gym as part of your program, your routine, and just having a really off day and not being able to do everything that you thought you were going to be able to accomplish.
And skipping a day is also fine.
That's true. And that's the thing. I think what you're honing in on is that it's a lot of the emphasis that we have is on the outcome, but a lot of the focus should really be on the process. It's not about what I've been able to achieve. It's about the fact that there have been so many bumps in the road and that I have navigated them. And even if I have achieved up until this point, that doesn't mean it's going to be smooth sailing. I will inevitably encounter other things. But because I've successfully resolved the previous ones, I have more belief in my abilities to move forward. And so when you were telling me, the whole Inspector Gadget thing, I love that. This idea of looking for the evidence, because we're not very balanced, right? When we're feeling triggered and feeling like we're not good enough.
Not very solution focused either.
Exactly. But one of the things that happens is we forget how far we've come. And the same, I think, can apply to kids, right? We can look at today and our goal moving forward and feeling like it's so far away, and we neglect that we had many goals over the previous years or decades that felt at one time too far away, and maybe were a windy road to get there, but we did get there. So sometimes looking back and acknowledging and celebrating helps to kind of recalibrate and fuel us into feeling confident to be able to tackle what lies ahead.
And as you said, sometimes we're not in our clear minds, we're not in a position to necessarily reflect or process all emotions appropriately. So having some easily accessible resources right there, like positive self-affirmations, or communicating those self-affirmations with our kids built in their daily life, while helping them brush their teeth, while combing their hair. With my son, I ask him, okay, who is the smartest in the world? Me, Yanis. And who is the strongest in the world? Me, Yanis. And what can Yanis do? Everything. So, it's not embedded really, it's just a learned behavior, it's just a response to a question, but these are the stepping stones, right? And it doesn't even have to be self-affirmation, it can be just a nice note on their lunchbox every day, or a hopeful note, or even a riddle. It doesn't have to be like the smartest, most intelligent thing in the world. It's there to remind them that we are around and that we are ready to encounter and deal with everything that they will want eventually to share with us.
So I'm hearing two things that I think are probably really important for us as parents. Number one is for our kids to see that we have and hold them in unconditional positive regard. And that the way that we see them, our love for them, our belief in them, our admiration of them doesn't change based on their performance or their behavior. Some things might be better than others. We might be more satisfied with some behavior than others. We might want to reshape certain things. But at the end of the day, I love you. I'm proud of you. I believe in you, no matter what.
And this doesn't change. I may disagree with your choices. I may disagree with your decisions. Let me help you take a wiser, a more self-helpful decision. Sometimes it is the behavior that I don't accept, that I don't agree with, and let's restructure that. And yes, you may have to deal with consequences in response to the negative behavior, but my love for you is definitely unconditional. What it is important for parents to know is that understanding is an intervention, and a very significant, and as passive as it sounds, it's quite the opposite. It's very active. Knowing that you are understood connects you with the other person, with your caregiver, with your significant other. When you feel connected, your self-value and your willingness to expose yourself out there is much more evident, because you know that you have a safety net. You know that you have a reference point to always return back to.
I think that this line is going to stick with me. Understanding is an intervention because it's at the core of who we are. We're social creatures, right? We belong in groups, we function in groups, we thrive in groups. And to feel ostracized or disconnected from people in general, and especially people that you care about and that care about you, is very, very painful. And I think that, as adults and as parents, we can even extrapolate that to our own lives. If we are having a bad day and we maybe overreact or have a disproportionate level of frustration towards that traffic that you were describing, don't need to be fact checked and corrected that it wasn't really that big of a deal. It was only a few extra minutes. Someone just saying, you know what? Again, I keep saying this, that sucks. That really sucks. I can see why you would be annoyed. Can be so, so, so powerful in that safety net and in that feeling of not being alone. And it diffuses, I think, everything else that's going on and probably opens up that pathway to that shared problem solving.
And identifying your support system together, help them identify who you can rely on, what you can do about this problem, how can you navigate this problem is as actionable as much as preventative. A closing line that I find very powerful for parents to know is to know and communicate that there is not a single thing that we cannot figure out together. And this is exactly how you can show your unconditional love. This is how you show your receptiveness towards listening to all problems, no matter how hard they are. And you may not have all the answers, and you may not be ready to deal with all that. I don't think that there is a single parent that is ready to deal with extreme challenges, right? But we cannot avoid them. But letting your child know that you are there and that you will figure it out together. You may not have the answers, but you will figure it out together during the process is very, very powerful and very, it allows to both sides, it helps them know that you don't have all the answers, you're not a god, but you're willing to deal with that.
But I'm beside you. I'm beside you for that fight, and I'm always aligned with you, and we will figure it out. We will figure it out together. As you were saying that, I was thinking, you know, I have two kids. My son is 20 and my daughter is 9. So the issues that they bring to me are very different. But borrowing also what you were saying earlier about the photo, I was thinking I should print a picture of me with each of them with this little note and give it to them so that when they are going through adversity, whether it's the little things at school, like around the playground, or the bigger things like, I don't know what's going to happen with that exam and my performance in this course for the year, they can have that reminder,
the reference point,
that reference point that if I doubt myself for a second, even if the worst case happens, I know that I have someone there with me. Yeah. And I imagine that would be very, very reassuring for the child or the teenager, and even for the parent to know that we have given and communicated something that is very powerful and helpful for them.
You can also keep a log with their favorite things, especially for your 9-year-old daughter. This may make more sense. Help her see that that you pay close attention to what she likes, and that you bring more of those in your daily routine. Again, a strategy that helps them recognize that their actions are valuable and what they like and what they dislike, and their personality is embraced.
Yes, yes. And they have a voice, right? Because there's a big powerlessness, especially for young children, where they have everything to an extent. It feels like it can be dictated to them. So to have someone recognize that you like this and dislike this, and I'll try to incorporate and remove within reason and wherever possible, also helps them feel that autonomy and that sense of self and control. Sofia, thank you so much for all of your insights today about what self-esteem is, the factors that contribute to developing self-esteem. You gave some really excellent strategies that parents and other stakeholders can use to help build it for children and adolescents. As I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, you are available at Thrive, where you work with children and teenagers through a number of things, self-esteem related or not, although I think we can establish that self-esteem usually plays at least a partial role in most of the more commonly presenting problems like anxiety and bullying and peer relationships and depression and things like that. So if anyone wants to reach out, they can find you at Thrive. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. I hope it was helpful. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.